I'm Jenny of NollieBean, where modern quilting meets color, creativity, and joy. Welcome back to the studio. Today I am sharing two things with you. One is my favorite quilting techniques, which is making 4 at a time flying geese. And I'm also sharing a progress update on my two blocks for the block of the month Maple Star quilts that I'm sewing up during 2025. So before we jump into the tutorial, I'll first be sewing up my scrappy block. So I did make another dive through my scrap bin and selected the fabrics that I'll be using for this block. I selected a busier than usual fabric that I'm going to be using for the background. So I did pair it with some solids and just one other simple print to help keep it from being too loud. Okay, so let's dive into this tutorial. First, here is a quick cheat sheet showing the steps that I'll be covering, as well as a size chart to make 11 different sizes of flying geese. And I will leave a link in the description below to sign up to have this cheat sheet emailed to you. As we get started, I want to remind you that I'm sewing a scrappy quilt block, and so I'm using 2 different colors for my smaller squares, which will result in a scrappy flying geese. So you will definitely see that scrappiness come out as we go along. The first step is to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the 4 smaller squares. And I like to use a fine tip marker for this step since we'll be trimming on that line, and this mark will just end up either cut off or in the seam allowance. Next, we will place and pin 2 smaller squares on opposite corners of the large square, and we'll have right sides together. And the drawn diagonal lines should line up with one another, and the 2 squares will also overlap slightly. Then we will sew 1/4 inch on both sides of the drawn line. Once those are sewn, we will cut apart on that drawn line and press our seams. I prefer to press this first seam open, but you can also choose to press it towards the darker fabric. Next, place and pin the remaining 2 small squares right sides together on each unit. And again, sew 1/4 inch on both sides of that diagonal line. Once the 2 sides are sewn, you will then cut apart on that drawn line and press these seams. For the second seam, I always prefer to press towards the outer smaller triangle. And now you will have 4 flying geese, but they still need trimming. I do have a specialty ruler that I like to use to trim flying geese. The ruler that I have is called a wing clipper, and it has markings that are specific to flying geese. and they help you line up your points when trimming. But you do not need a specialty ruler. I, for years, just used my regular ruler and trimmed them to the appropriate size. So you can do that as well. But with the wing clipper, because it has the markings for that center point, I have noticed that I've had more accuracy with the specific ruler. But again, it is not necessary. Once the flying geese are trimmed, uh, they're done. You have your 4 flying geese. And so now that I do have them ready to go, it's time to finish sewing my scrappy maple star quilt block. Next, I am moving on to my August block for my 2-color version. And if you have been following along, you may recall that last month I cut out the fabric for both last month and this month. And so right now I am sewing up the inverse color arrangement to last month's quilt block. And here she is. Thanks again for following along. I hope you found the tutorial in this video helpful, and please ask any questions that you have down below in the comments. I do always check and respond to comments. Thanks for watching.